In the era of the all-volunteer force, veterans issues are national security issues because how we treat the veterans of past wars has a direct bearing on who will be willing to fight our future wars. And the second conviction that we had was that the veteran space is very different from more traditional areas of national security, the intelligence community, for instance, or budgets and acquisitions. Those are areas that have deep reservoirs of human capital dedicated to analysis. And the veterans community has some of those, but it has an awful lot of advocates. And we thought that one thing that we could do as an independent platform was bring some more analytical capability to bear in the area of veterans work. So those two beliefs, that veterans policy is a part of our national security policy and that the community would benefit from a deeper reservoir of analytical capacity, influenced a program at CNAS that we call Military Veterans and Society. Dr. Meg Harrell and Nancy Burglas lead our work on these issues, and so it's under the aegis of that program that we hold this event this evening.
In 2005, I got focusing on Fallujah and mentioned to a friend that I was really concerned about these young Marines I saw in November of 2004 at Fallujah, and he said, "Why don't you go down to the hospital?" And so I came down to Bethesda Hospital at that time, and I've been doing it ever since. I was out there this morning. It's, I don't know, probably 25 or 30 times I've been to the hospital over the last several years, and I just have been deeply moved and also impressed by these young men and young women that I'm meeting at the hospital, and I want to do something to be supportive of them. And this book just sort of evolved from that.
I was going to ask you a little bit to talk about your hospital visits too. And one of the things that so powerfully comes out of the book is the sense that the cost of our wars are not really borne by society, but often by the individuals who fight them. And I wanted to get talk a little bit about what it's like to go there. What kinds of questions do the soldiers and Marines that you meet with ask you, and what sorts of questions do you ask them?
My concern about the way that our country thinks about war today is that we don't know what war is like. I don't pretend to know what war was like. Nobody shot at me. I didn't shoot at anyone. I've sure read about it a lot. I've talked to people a lot, but I don't think there's anything like the experience of being in a combat situation. But people don't understand that. There is a detachment and an abstraction even that we tend to have when we think about those people who are fighting our wars. First of all, most people don't know anyone who is over there. They're not a cross-section of American society, the young men and women who are serving in the military today. They're not our children or our neighbors' children or kids from the neighborhood in most neighborhoods in this country who are fighting over there today. And so that means that it's everyone is a bit more detached.
One of the things I found fascinating is this book really gets at the sort of composition of our military and contrasts sort of today and how unrepresentative it feels versus earlier eras. It was fascinating to read in World War II that if you were from a higher socioeconomic background, you were more likely to be a casualty than from lower backgrounds. And then that begins to shift with Korea and seems to shift with each war a little bit going forward. So I guess if you could talk about that, and then just also how fundamentally I'm going to load up questions because this is my last chance. How unrepresentative our military is today in some ways of our broader society, and whether it matters and whether we should really care.
The military today tends to be more rural than urban. They tend to be more southern and midwestern and small town western than they do northeastern. They tend to be more people who have not had a college education. There was a concern in 1973 when we went to the all-volunteer Army that the military would become a force of the black and of people of color and the poor. That's not been true. The military today is more lower middle class or middle class than it is poor, and whites and blacks are overrepresented in the military, and some of that has to do with the southern component. Asian, Hispanic, Latinos are underrepresented in the military. And the poorest poorest Americans are not enlisting in the military. Part of that is that the Army has really been able to hold increasingly to the stricture that you have to have a high school education and that you have to meet certain health requirements, you have to meet certain medical requirements, so you can't have any arrest record, and they're able increasingly to insist upon these and have fewer waivers, and so this tends to be more lower middle class and middle class than it is poor urban core. It's shameful that we've not had a tax to pay for this war. During the Korean War, Sam Rayburn, who was a Texas congressman, said, "Damn it, we got to have a war tax. We can't ask these boys to go over there and fight the war and then come home and pay for the war because we've done it by debt." And people ranging from Robert Taft to Richard Nixon, the Republican Party, said, "You're absolutely right." And so there was a war tax. There was a surtax in Vietnam. It was too late. It was inadequate. We fought a war with a tax cut. And we've not asked anyone to pay for it. I wrote to several people in Congress last summer saying it's time to do this. These are all people I knew on a first-name basis. Not a single one of them replied to me. Nobody wanted to hear anything about a tax. And I think that the great tragedy and irony there is even the most anti-tax people would say, yeah, we really should help to pay for war. We're going to ask these kids, half of 1% or 1% of the population to come home from the war and say, now you can spend the rest of your life paying for this war that you just fought. And I just think it's not a way to do this.
I will say,
we're not sharing in it.
Having come back from Afghanistan, one of the things that struck me was how few embedded reporters were left out there. I was joking with one of my colleagues that it was me and then a couple of other guys, one of whom seemed to have embedded just because it came with free meals and the alternative was homelessness back in the States.
But another thing about that, and there are fewer reporters over there, and part of it is just the fact that obviously the media is changing dramatically, and many of them are needing to cut back on budgets. The Post, the Times, NPR, a few places, continue to send people over there. And there's not a lot dramatic to report on. As somebody said in Vietnam, we were reporting on firefights that wouldn't have even had a mention during World War II, and now there aren't even firefights to report on in most cases. And so you report, as you did, I think, so well about being on patrol and worrying about IEDs and how it is you get approval to take out a group that maybe, it's just a different type of war. And boy, it's the drip, drip, drip. It's not a front page story in most newspapers, and I think that's the great tragedy. We don't know what's going on over there. We don't know who these kids are. We're not quite sure what it is we're asking them to do, and we're not helping to pay for what they're doing. Other than that, we're all involved.